If I tell you this, maybe you'll never look at me the same way again. Maybe you'll say I'm a monster too. But before you judge me, you need to know what it's like to hear your baby's muffled screams through a steel lid, and know that if you open it, he might kill you both. My name is Ellie. I live, or used to live, in a rusty trailer on the edge of a small town in Nebraska. Everyone knows each other here. Everyone pretends not to know what happens behind thin trailer walls. They saw the bruises on my arms, the missing teeth, but no one knocked on my door. Not even when the cold winds carried my son's cries across the yard. You probably think, why didn't you run? I asked myself that too, every single night as I lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, my bones aching from his boots, my ears ringing from his belt. I was 19 when I met David, 20 when he proposed, 21 when he bought that damn chest freezer. For meat, he said. Turns out, the meat was my son. I still remember the smell of frozen blood and old wood. I remember my boys, tiny hands pounding, then going still. Some nights, I'd stand there for hours, my hand hovering over the latch, listening to David's snores in the bedroom. My legs would shake, my lips would bleed from biting down the scream. But that night, the night I finally did it, something inside me snapped. And I want you to hear every moment. I want you to feel every second of my fear, because if one woman out there is living what I lived, maybe she'll see that sometimes the only way out is through hell. Tell me, where are you watching from? Please, subscribe and like this story if it hits you. It helps more people hear it. And now, let me take you back to the first time David locked my son in the freezer, and I learned what real monsters look like. I still remember the day I brought Tommy home from the hospital. He was so tiny, red-faced, his little fists waving like he was already trying to fight back at the world. I was just 22, young, stupid, and still trying to believe that David loved me. We'd been living in that dented trailer for almost 2 years by then. David promised we'd move to a real house once he saved enough from the slaughterhouse. I held onto that lie like it was a lifeline. The first few months were quiet, in a way that made me think maybe things would get better. David was sweet, almost tender with Tommy. He'd hold him while he watched TV, his beer sweating onto the baby blanket. But by the time Tommy turned 3, David's patience rotted away, like everything else in that place. He'd snap if the boy cried at night. He'd hiss at me, "Shut him up, Ellie, or I'll shut him up myself." One night, after a long shift at the plant, David came home drunker than usual. The snow outside was so thick you could lose a man in it. He slammed the door so hard the window cracked. Tommy had spilled juice on the couch, just a tiny stain, but enough for David to explode. He grabbed Tommy by the arm so rough I thought it would break. I remember how my baby looked at me, his eyes wide, his mouth trembling. I wanted to step in, I swear I did, but David's fist landed on my cheek before I could move. He dragged Tommy out to the porch, barefoot in the snow, screaming. I crawled to the window, pressing my swollen face to the glass. That's when I saw him open the old chest freezer we kept outside, the one he used for deer meat in the fall. He lifted Tommy like a sack of potatoes, shoved him in, slammed the lid shut, and sat on it laughing. I clawed at the door, but he locked it from the outside. I could hear Tommy's muffled cries, the thumps, then silence. When he finally staggered back in, he smelled like whiskey and hate. He leaned over me, his breath sour. "See what happens when you don't listen. Now you know." He stumbled to bed, passed out like nothing happened. I waited until his snores rattled the walls. I grabbed a hammer from under the sink, slipped out in the snow barefoot. My feet burned, then went numb. I pried that lid open with shaking hands. Tommy's lips were blue, but his eyes fluttered open when he heard me sob. He was alive. That time, you'd think I'd have run right then, wouldn't you? I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But where would I go with a half-frozen child and a man who'd kill us if he caught me? So I stayed. I tucked Tommy into my bed that night, curled my body around him like a shield, and told myself it was just once. Just once. We could survive it. I'd find a way. But it wasn't just once. The freezer became his punishment box. He'd wait until Tommy spilled something or cried too loud. He'd look me dead in the eye and say, "You want him to live? Then, shut your mouth." And every time, a piece of me died. Then came the night I found the padlock on the freezer. David said it was to keep the coons out, but I knew better. I knew it was for Tommy. That night, I lay awake, staring at that lock in his dirty hands. And that was the first night I truly wished my husband would die. But wishing doesn't make a monster disappear. I learned that the hard way. The next morning, the knock came at the door. A knock that changed everything and pushed me closer to doing the unthinkable. I still hear that knock in my nightmares, soft, polite, like someone tapping on a coffin lid. It was Mrs. Parker, my neighbor from the next trailer over. She was older, with wiry gray hair, pulled tight under a scarf, and that fake smile she wore like cheap perfume. She always pretended not to hear our fights, never looked me in the eye at the mailbox. But that morning she stood on my steps, clutching a pie she probably pulled from her freezer. I remember the smell, cherries, and crust, like a memory of a family I never had. "Ellie," she said, voice sweet as poison, "I heard Tommy crying last night. Everything okay?" She tried to peek past my shoulder. I stepped in the doorway, blocking her view. "He's sick," I lied. "Fever." Her eyes flicked to the bruise blooming on my jaw. I could see her calculating. Should she press or pretend? In this town, people liked their secrets wrapped up neat. The sheriff went to church with David. The pastor sold him moonshine on the side. Nobody wanted to make trouble with the man who could gut a deer in 5 minutes flat, or a woman, for that matter. "You know," Mrs. Parker said, lowering her voice, "people talk. Maybe you ought to think about what's best for the boy." What's best for the boy? The words burned holes in my ears. I wanted to scream, then help me, call someone, get us out, but I just nodded, took her pie with trembling hands, and closed the door in her face. I sank to the floor, pressing my cheek to the cold linoleum. Tommy was hiding under the table, sucking his thumb. He didn't ask about the freezer. He knew better. That same afternoon, David came home early. He slammed the pie on the counter, sending glass shards skittering across the floor. "What's this crap?" he barked. I told him Mrs. Parker brought it. He sniffed the filling, then grabbed me by the hair, yanking me so close I could see the black flecks in his eyes. "You tell that nosy bitch to stay out of our business." I don't know what got into me then. Maybe it was seeing Tommy peeking from behind the couch. Maybe it was the sting on my scalp. Maybe it was that piece of me that still wanted to live. I spat in David's face, just a drop of spit. But it was enough. His knuckles split my lip open before I even hit the floor. That night, he made Tommy stand in front of the freezer while he lectured him about respect. Tommy's knees knocked together. He was so small, just skin and bones and fear. David popped the lock, tossed a bag of old ice aside, and shoved Tommy in. I heard my baby's head hit the metal wall. David sat on the lid again, humming a country tune, tapping his fingers like he was drumming on a bar counter. I wanted to run at him with the frying pan, bash his skull in, but the truth is, I was frozen too. My feet stuck to the floor, my throat locked up. He turned to me, that grin wide and crooked. "You want to join him?" he sneered when he finally let Tommy out. The boy couldn't stand. I wrapped him in blankets, rocked him in my lap, kissed his frostbitten fingers. David stood over us, beer can in hand, spitting dip juice into the sink. "You ever tell anyone?" he slurred. "And I'll bury you both so deep no find you." The next morning, while David slept it off, I opened every cabinet in that trailer, every drawer. I found the keys he hid above the doorframe, the spare car keys taped under the table. I found my mother's old locket, the one thing I had left from before him. And I found a piece of paper I didn't expect, a crumpled envelope with a number scrawled inside, a number that could save us. It was Mrs. Parker's handwriting, but before I could decide what to do with it, I heard David's boots thud on the hallway floor, and the click of the padlock in his hand. He knew I'd been looking. The sound of that padlock clicking against his palm made my heart stutter. I shoved the envelope down my shirt, hoping he wouldn't see the corner peeking out. David stepped into the kitchen, his eyes bloodshot, hair sticking up like a wild dog's fur. He smelled like stale beer and anger. Always anger. "What you doing, Ellie?" His voice had that low calm that always came before the storm. He squinted at the open drawers, the cabinet doors swinging wide like broken wings. "Just cleaning." I lied, forcing a smile so tight it made my split lip reopen. I tasted metal on my tongue. I could see Tommy behind me, standing by the couch, with his blanket dragging on the stained carpet. He didn't move. He knew better than to breathe too loud. David's eyes flicked to Tommy, then back to me. He stepped closer, the padlock tapping against the freezer. "You, trying to find something, huh?" He tilted his head like a snake watching a mouse. "Looking for money. Keys," Who you gonna run to, Ellie? Mrs. Parker. The way he hissed her name sent chills through my spine. He knew, of course he did. In this town, secrets slipped through trailer walls like cigarette smoke. I swallowed. I wasn't, I swear. His hand shot out, grabbed my wrist. He squeezed so tight I felt the bones grind together. He yanked me forward, nose to nose. I could see the cracked skin on his lips, the dried spit in the corner of his mouth. You think you're smart, he growled. You think you can just take my boy and run? His boy, he always said that. His, never ours, never mine. I thought he was gonna hit me right there, but instead, he shoved me backwards so hard I slammed into the counter. Pain shot through my ribs. I gasped, clutching my side. David's eyes flicked to Tommy again. Come here, boy. Tommy didn't move. He clutched his blanket tighter. I wanted to scream at him. Run, baby, run. But where would he go? There was nothing but frozen fields and Mrs. Parker's rotting porch. David stomped across the room, grabbed Tommy by the arm. My baby whimpered that soft sound that used to break my heart when he was sick. Now, it made my blood boil. David, please, don't, I begged. I tried to reach for Tommy, but David swung his free hand and backhanded me so hard my vision went white. When I blinked the stars away, I saw David opening the freezer again. He tossed a pack of old meat aside, dropped Tommy in like he was dumping out trash. Tommy didn't scream this time. He just curled up, tiny and shaking. David slammed the lid shut. The padlock snapped into place. He pocketed the key. You think you can take my boy? He barked. He stays right here, Ellie, where he belongs. I crawled across the floor, my hands slipping on the dirty linoleum. I pressed my ear to the freezer. I could feel the cold seeping into my skin. Inside, Tommy's tiny fists banged once, twice, then stopped. David leaned against the counter, cracking open another beer. He watched me with that crooked smile. Go ahead, try to call someone. Sheriff won't come. Pastor don't care. And that old bitch Parker, she'll be next. I knew then, if I didn't do something, my boy would die in that box. Maybe not tonight, but soon. And so would I. When. David passed out again, bottle still in his hand, boots still on. I dragged myself to the bathroom, locked the door. I pulled that envelope from my shirt. Mrs. Parker's shaky handwriting stared back at me. A phone number for a women's shelter 2 counties over. I sank to the floor. My knees pulled to my chest. My mind raced. How do I get the key? How do I get Tommy out? How do I get us to that number before he wakes up? And then I remembered something David kept under the bed. The old hunting knife. The same one he used to gut deer in the woods. The same one he'd threatened me with once when I asked for divorce papers. That night, I made my choice. I would get that knife. I would get my boy out. And if David tried to stop me, I'd make sure he never locked that freezer again. But when I crawled back into the bedroom to get the knife, it was gone, and someone else was waiting for me in the dark. I froze right there on the bedroom floor, my palms pressing into the worn carpet, heart hammering so loud I thought David would hear it, even in his drunken sleep. But it wasn't David standing in the shadows near the closet. It was Tommy, my baby boy, barefoot, still wrapped in his faded blanket. His lips were blue from the cold, and his eyes were wide, too wide for a boy his age. He held something in his tiny hand. I crawled closer, whispering, Tommy, what did you do, baby? He opened his palm. The hunting knife, the big one with the black handle and the edge that never dulled, rested there, almost bigger than his forearm. My breath caught in my throat. He'd gone and found it on his own. My brave, broken boy. I pulled him into my arms, the blade dropping between us, nicking my leg. I didn't care. I just felt his heartbeat against mine, the cold still clinging to his skin. Did he see you? I asked, my voice trembling. He shook his head. Tears spilled down his cheeks, leaving shiny tracks in the dirt. I could hear David snoring in the next room. That sound used to make me feel safe, like the monster was hibernating. Now, I knew better. Monsters never sleep, they just wait. I tucked Tommy back under the covers, told him, stay here. No matter what you hear, you don't come out. Do you hear me? He nodded, eyes big as moons. He looked so much like me when I was a child, small, scared, waiting for grown-ups to fix everything. But there were no grown-ups now, just me and a knife. I slipped back into the kitchen, knife hidden in my robe. The padlock on the freezer gleamed in the dim light. I touched it with my fingertip, feeling the chill seep into my bone. How many times had I dreamed of taking this lock off, grabbing Tommy, and running until my lungs gave out. But I still needed the key, and David never let that thing out of his pocket. I sat at the table, staring at the beer cans scattered everywhere. The clock ticked so loud it sounded like a death drum. I tried to remember every detail Mrs. Parker told me when she slipped me that number months ago. The place was 3 hours away if you drove fast, maybe 4, with the snow. I'd need gas. I'd need food. I'd need to do it when David was too drunk to chase, but he always woke up. Always my eyes drifted to the freezer again. The metal was dented from where Tommy had pounded so many times. My fists clenched around the knife handle until my knuckles ached. I whispered to myself, "You do it tonight or you die here." I went back to the bedroom. David was sprawled on the bed, one boot still on, mouth open. The keyring was looped on his belt. I could see the tiny brass padlock key glinting in the moonlight spilling through the broken blinds. I got on my knees next to him. My fingers hovered over the belt. The knife felt heavy in my pocket. My mind split in two. One side screaming, "Grab the key, run." The other whispering, "Do it now, do it forever. Make sure he can't follow you." His hand twitched. I froze. He mumbled something, eyes rolling under his lids. I held my breath so long, my vision started to gray out. When he stilled again, I slipped my fingers around the keyring, lifted it an inch, and he jerked awake. His eyes snapped open, pupils blown wide. He didn't even speak at first, just grabbed my wrist so hard I heard a pop. Pain shot up my arm. The knife clattered to the floor. His lip curled into that smile I hated more than anything in this world. "Trying to rob me in my sleep, Ellie." His voice was pure venom, slurred but sharp enough to cut. He yanked me up by the hair, dragging me into the kitchen. My bare feet scraped over the torn linoleum. He threw me against the table so hard it rattled. "You want the key so bad," he hissed. He fumbled with his belt, waving the key in my face like a prize I'd never touch. I heard Tommy's small gasp from the bedroom. David's eyes darted that way. He bared his teeth, pushing me toward the freezer. "How about you take his place tonight, huh? Teach you some respect." He grabbed my arm, twisting it behind my back until I screamed. The freezer lid creaked, open, the cold pouring out like a ghost. I felt the metal edge dig into my hip. He pushed my face toward the open box. I could smell the old meat, the rust, the scent of frozen blood that never really washed out. But behind my back, my fingers scraped the table and found the knife. David didn't see it. He was too busy laughing, drunk on his own power. I felt my heartbeat slow, my vision sharpened. Every bruise, every broken bone, every muffled cry, they all boiled up inside me like fire. And just as he shoved my head down toward that freezing dark, I turned. The blade flashed, and everything turned red. For a moment, everything went silent, like the whole world sucked in its breath. I felt the knife slide in like it was cutting butter. But the sound, the wet crunch of it, I'll never forget that sound as long as I live. David staggered back, eyes wide, hands clutching his side where the blood was already soaking through his shirt. He looked down at the red spreading across his flannel, then back at me, like he couldn't believe I'd finally done it. Maybe I couldn't believe it either. He stumbled, knocking over a chair. The freezer lid banged shut behind me. I stood there, my hands still gripping the handle, my whole arm trembling. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would break my ribs. I could taste bile in my mouth. David tried to say something, my name, maybe, or one last threat, but all that came out was a wet gurgle. He dropped to his knees, one hand reaching for the counter like he could pull himself up. I backed away, my socks sliding in the puddle of blood already pooling under him. I thought I'd feel strong, brave, free, but I just felt hollow, like the knife had cut out a piece of me too. I wanted to run to Tommy, to tell him it was over, but it wasn't, not yet. I still needed that damn key. David's fingers fumbled with his belt. Even as his eyes rolled back in his head, I dropped to my knees, ignoring the sticky warmth spreading across the floor. I yanked the keyring off his jeans, so hard, the metal links snapped. His hand clamped down on my wrist one last time, weak, but still there. He looked at me with those eyes, the same eyes that used to charm me back when I was dumb enough to think love could change a man like him. He tried to say something, but his mouth just bubbled blood. Then his grip loosened. His head hit the floor with a thud that made me flinch. I scrambled back, pressing my back to the cabinets. For a moment I couldn't move. I just sat there on the cold, sticky linoleum, the key digging into my palm, staring at the man who'd haunted my life for years now, just a crumpled, bleeding heap. It's over, I told myself. It's over, Ellie. But my mind screamed back, no, not yet, Tommy. I had to get Tommy. I ran to the bedroom. He was crouched by the door, peeking out through a crack. His eyes darted from me to the blood on my clothes, to the knife still clutched in my shaking hand. Mama, he whispered, his voice so small, I almost collapsed. Is he gone? I dropped to my knees, pulled him into my arms, my tears mixing with the blood on my cheek. Baby, it's okay. We're gonna be okay now, but we have to move. You hear me? We have to go, right now. I bundled him up in every blanket I could find, tugged on my old winter coat, shoved the envelope with Mrs. Parker's number into my pocket. I grabbed the car keys from the drawer where David hid them. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped them twice. Tommy clung to me, his tiny fingers fisting my shirt so tight I could feel his heartbeat thumping against my ribs. I wanted to tell him not to look at David, but it was too late. His eyes flicked to the kitchen, to the mess I'd made, the thing that used to be his father. He didn't cry. He just buried his face in my shoulder. I pushed him outside into the biting cold. The snow was knee-deep, glittering under the moon like a fresh grave. I stumbled to the truck, my breath fogging in the air. The engine coughed and sputtered, old piece of junk that David always threatened to take away if I ever got ideas about leaving. But it roared to life, the muffler rattling like bones. I buckled Tommy in, my hands smearing red across his blanket. I tried to wipe it off, but it just made it worse. He didn't say a word, just stared out the window, his breath making little ghosts on the glass. I looked back at the trailer one last time, the place that had stolen every ounce of joy I'd ever had. I thought about burning it down, lighting that freezer on fire and watching the walls melt. But I didn't have time. I backed out of the drive, tires spinning in the snow. The headlights caught something on the porch, a figure. My heart stopped. It was Mrs. Parker. She stood there in her tattered coat, snow piling on her scarf, eyes locked on me through the blinding white. I rolled down the window, my breath freezing in my throat. She didn't look surprised, just tired, like she'd been waiting for this moment all along. You going? She called out, her voice carried on the wind. I nodded, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles cracked. We're done. I'm taking Tommy. I'm going to that place you told me about. She stepped closer, her boots crunching through the snow. You got gas, food. You'll never make it in this storm. I'll make it, I snapped. But the panic was there, thick, rising. Mrs. Parker's eyes drifted to the truck, to Tommy curled up under his blanket. She sighed, then reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. Keys. Take my car, she said. Full tank, snow tires. You'll get farther. My mind raced. Take her car. Leave the truck. It made sense, but it meant I'd owe her, and I didn't trust debts anymore. I opened my mouth to say no, but then headlights appeared down the road, a sheriff's cruiser, crawling slow, cutting through the snow like a shark's fin. Mrs. Parker grabbed my arm. Decide, Ellie, now. And in that frozen second, blood still on my hands, my baby shivering beside me, I knew this was the moment that would decide if we lived or died. The sheriff's headlights cut through the falling snow like a blade. My gut twisted so hard I thought I'd puke right there on Mrs. Parker's boots. I could see the sheriff's silhouette behind the wheel. Old Sheriff Duggan, with his thick mustache and whiskey breath. David's fishing buddy. David's hunting buddy. David's secret keeper. He'd never come for me before. Not when the bruises were fresh. Not when the neighbors whispered. But now that David was lying dead on my kitchen floor. Now he'd come. Mrs. Parker squeezed my arm so hard I felt her bones through her gloves. Ellie, you listen to me. You take my Buick. It's parked out back, full tank, chains on the tires. You don't stop till you're 2 counties out. You hear me? I glanced at Tommy. He was awake now, eyes wide, the blanket pulled up to his nose. He was trembling, not from the cold, but from the sight of those red and blue lights crawling down our road. I can't just leave your car, I whispered. The cold burned my teeth as I spoke. You can and you will, Mrs. Parker snapped. You think I want that bastard's friends knocking on my door? Let 'em. They'll see you're gone, they'll blame me, and maybe I'll finally feel useful again. The cruiser's spotlights swept across the yard. It caught my truck halfway, turned toward the road, engine running, exhaust curling like ghosts into the storm. If Dugan saw the blood, if he put it together, he'd never let me go. He'd haul me in for murder, say it was cold-blooded, say I'd gone crazy. They'd bury me under that trailer, same as David planned. I leaned in the window, grabbed Tommy's cold face in my bloody hands. Baby, we're gonna run, okay? Mrs. Parker's gonna help us. You gotta be so brave, just for a little while longer. Tommy's lip quivered, but he nodded. He didn't ask questions. He never did anymore. I cut the engine and climbed out, legs shaking so bad I nearly slipped on the ice. Mrs. Parker grabbed my elbow, practically dragged me behind her trailer, the snow crunching under our boots. The sheriff's cruiser idled by my place, its spotlight now pinned on the front porch, the door swinging wide open like the house itself was confessing my sins. Behind the trailer sat the old Buick, big, boxy, beige paint chipped at the edges. I remembered when her husband used to drive it to church, back when she still wore her hair in curls and brought me fresh pies instead of stale ones. Funny, the things you remember when your life's about to crack open. Mrs. Parker popped the trunk. Inside was a beat-up duffel bag, blankets, bottled water, jerky, even a small plastic gas can. She'd planned this for me. Or maybe for herself, back when her old man used to knock her teeth out before he drank himself to death. Take it, she said. Food, water. Don't you stop for anything. You hear me? I could hear the cruiser doors slam shut, voices carried across the wind. The sheriff calling my name like he had any right to speak it. I felt Tommy's little hand slip into mine, ice cold but solid. My lifeline. Mrs. Parker pressed her car keys into my palm. You get that baby somewhere warm, somewhere safe. My voice cracked. Why are you doing this for me? She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the same fear in her eyes that had lived in mine for years. Because no one did it for me, she whispered. A shout cracked through the storm. A flashlight beam swung behind the trailer. Sheriff Duggan's voice, angry now. Ellie, get back here. Don't make this worse than it is. I shoved Tommy into the back seat, the old leather stiff with cold. I jumped in the driver's side, my fingers clumsy on the ignition. The Buick sputtered, coughed, then roared to life like an old beast waking up for one last run. Through the mirror, I saw the sheriff's flashlight bouncing closer. I saw his boots crunch into the snow behind the Buick. I could almost hear David's voice in my ear, sneering, "You ain't going nowhere, Ellie. You're mine." But David was dead, and I wasn't his anymore. I slammed my foot on the gas. The Buick lurched forward, tires biting into the snow. The sheriff yelled something. I heard the crack of his radio, the static of him calling it in. But the tail lights of Mrs. Parker's Buick vanished into the white night. Tommy didn't make a sound. He just curled up under the blanket, eyes squeezed shut. I wanted to reach back, to hold him, but my knuckles were locked around the wheel. I had no idea where I was going, just away, farther than the sheriff could follow, farther than David's ghost could whisper. But the snow was getting thicker, now, swirling like a wall. The Buick's old wipers squeaked uselessly, and my headlights barely cut through the white. Then, up ahead, red tail, a truck jackknifed across the road, blocking everything. I slammed the brakes. The Buick skidded sideways, tires screaming, snow spraying up in blinding sheets. We weren't alone out here, and if I didn't figure out what to do next, I'd lose the one thing I'd killed to protect. The Buick jolted to a stop just feet from the jackknife truck, its rusty bed blocking the narrow two-lane road like a barricade built by the devil himself. The engine sputtered, then settled into a low growl that matched the pounding in my ears. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles cracked. For a moment, all I heard was Tommy's shaky breathing in the back seat. He was peeking out from under his blanket, eyes wide, pupils blown dark as the night. "Mama, what's happening?" I forced myself to breathe slow, to push down the panic clawing at my throat. The snow kept falling, thicker now, swirling around the truck's broken taillights like dying embers. I leaned forward, squinting through the cracked windshield. No movement, no driver in sight. I checked the mirror, nothing behind us but a smear of tire tracks already half buried by fresh snow. No sheriff's lights, no more headlights in the distance. For now, I pushed open the car door. The wind hit me like a slap, sharp and howling. I sank ankle-deep in the drifts. Each step toward the truck felt like trudging through wet cement. I circled the front, heart hammering at every creak of ice under the tires. When I reached the cab, I saw the driver's door hanging open, empty. A half-smoked cigarette burned in the snow, hissing and sputtering. On the passenger seat sat a hunting rifle, propped up like an unwelcome promise. That's when I heard it, a crunch of boots. Behind me, I spun around, my pulse a roar in my ears. A figure stepped out from the dark, snow swirling around him like ghosts. For a second, I almost saw David, the way the man's shoulders hunched, the glint of metal in his hand. But David was rotting back in that trailer. This man was younger, scruffy beard iced over, eyes bloodshot. He smelled like gasoline and whiskey. When he got close enough for me to taste it on the wind, "You okay there, ma'am?" he slurred, like the word ma'am had never passed his lips before tonight. "I've got my boy in the car," I said, my voice low, calm, the way you talk to a snake you're trying not to spook. "We're just trying to get through. Your truck's blocking the road," he snorted, spit landing in the snow between us. "Storm knocked me sideways. Can't get her started. Been waitin' on help. You wouldn't happen to have a lift, would ya? A lift, out here, in the middle of nowhere, with my boy in the car." With the blood still under my fingernails, I forced a smile. "Sorry, my tank's nearly empty. There's a wrecker a few miles back." His eyes flicked past me, to the Buick idling behind us, the exhaust curled around Tommy's window, where I could just see his pale face pressed to the glass. The man's lips split into a grin, teeth yellow and chipped. "Cute kid, you driven him out in this shit? You running from something?" My blood went cold. "Keep him talking, Ellie. Keep him calm." I took a step back, my boots crunching. "In the ice. We're visiting family. Just got turned around in the storm." He chuckled, the sound scraping my nerves raw. "Family. Middle of a blizzard. Lady, you're full of shit." I glanced at the rifle still sitting in the truck cab. His eyes caught mine, and I knew he knew what I was thinking. His hand shot out, grabbed my arm so fast I yelped. The stink of him hit me like a wave. Sweat, booze, the sour bite of unwashed clothes. "How about you pop the trunk?" he said, his grip tightening. "Might be some gas in there. Or something else worth trading." I looked up into his eyes and saw the same hunger I'd seen in David's more times than I could count. The kind that didn't care what a woman said, didn't care she had a child waiting in the car, didn't care she had blood on her hands already. I twisted, my boot sliding on the ice. My wrist popped under his grip. He jerked me closer. So close, I could feel the cold steel of something in his pocket. A knife, maybe, or worse. I could see Tommy in the Buick, eyes huge, his tiny fists pressed against the window. He couldn't hear what we were saying, but he could see enough. He knew. I forced myself to breathe, to remember the hunting knife Mrs. Parker had packed in the duffel in the trunk. One last weapon. One last chance. "Please," I whispered, my voice cracking just enough to sound like prey. "Just let me go. We don't have anything." He leaned in, breath hot against my ear. "Oh, you got plenty." His free hand fumbled at his belt, trying to keep me pinned at the same time. My mind split in two, fear clawing at me, survival screaming louder. "Okay," I croaked, nodding at the trunk. "I'll show you. Just don't hurt my boy." He loosened his grip, just enough for me to wrench free. I stumbled back, boots sliding, fumbling for the trunk latch. He stepped around me, eyes locked on the Buick, not even seeing my hand slip inside the duffel bag. My fingers found the handle of the hunting knife, cold and heavy. He turned back, that grin still plastered across his chapped lips. "Atta girl." And, before he could take another step, I lunged up. The blade flashed under the yellow wash of my taillights, and Tommy's muffled scream cut through the howling storm. The knife sank in fast, so fast I almost didn't feel the blade pierce cloth, then skin, then something soft and wet underneath. He gasped, a ragged, gurgling sound that turned my stomach. His eyes widened, pupils blown black as he looked down at his gut, then back up at me like I was the monster in this story. Maybe I was, but monsters don't protect their children. Monsters don't fight to live. He stumbled back, hands grabbing at the wound. Blood, dark against the snow that fell thick and silent around us. For a heartbeat, we both just stood there, two shadows in the storm. His breath rattling out of him like a broken engine. Then he lunged. I barely dodged him. We slammed against the back bumper of the Buick. The trunk slammed shut with a metal bang that echoed through the trees. He was heavier than David, the whiskey in him giving him that sloppy, ugly strength. His hands wrapped around my throat, squeezing until sparks danced behind my eyes. I clawed at his wrists, boots skidding on the icy road. The knife slipped from my fingers, skittering across the snow. I could see it, just inches away, but my vision blurred. black spots growing like mold in the corners of my eyes. And then, a sound, sharp, shattering, a tiny voice, "Mama." It was Tommy, out of the car, my baby, barefoot in the snow, his blanket trailing behind him like a ghost's shadow. He stood there, eyes wide with terror, and something else, something hard. I wanted to scream at him to get back in the car, to hide, to run, but I couldn't make a sound. The man's thumbs pressed deeper into my windpipe. My knees buckled. Tommy looked down at the snow, at the knife lying there. His small hand reached for it. For a moment, the storm seemed to hush, the wind holding its breath for us. "No," I rasped, barely a whisper. "Tommy, don't." But he ignored me. My brave, broken boy. He lifted that knife with both hands, his tiny fingers white with cold and fear. The man turned, distracted just enough, his grip loosened. I sucked in air so sharp it burned. Tommy's face scrunched up like he was about to cry. But he didn't. He just swung the knife down, not at the man's neck or chest like you'd expect, but at his leg, sinking the blade deep into his thigh. The man howled, stumbled back, arms flailing. I fell to my knees, coughing, gasping, tasting blood in my mouth. Tommy dropped the knife, his little body shivering, eyes huge. I didn't think I'd just moved. I scooped Tommy up in my arms, his heartbeat hammering against my ribs. I shoved him back into the Buick's back seat, slammed the door, locked it. The man was still screaming, crawling in the snow, one leg dragging behind him like a broken branch. I grabbed the rifle from his truck. My hands shook so bad I almost dropped it, but I forced my fingers to hold tight. I'd never fired one alone before. David had taught me to clean it, to load it, but never to shoot, not unless he told me to. The man froze when he saw the barrel aimed at him. His mouth opened, but no words came. Just a soft whimper, steam curling from his lips. "You come near my boy again," I hissed, my voice raw. "I'll bury you right here, and the snow will cover your bones before dawn." He must have seen it in my eyes, the thing that David had never seen, that this time, I'd do it. He turned, crawling toward the tree line, leaving a dark smear in the white. I didn't wait to watch him disappear. I dropped the rifle in the snow, climbed back into the Buick. My hands fumbled the ignition so bad, I turned the key twice before the old engine growled back to life. Tommy sat, curled up tight, tears streaming down his cheeks, his breath fogging up the window. I reached back, touched his knee. "You did good, baby. You did so good. I'm so sorry you had to do that." He didn't answer. He just grabbed my bloody hand and squeezed it tight. I pulled back onto the road, swerving around the jackknifed truck, tires spinning until they found the grip to drag us forward. The snow swallowed the bloody mess behind us like it never happened. I drove blind, the wipers squealing against the windshield, headlights barely cutting through the storm. My thoughts rattled louder than the old Buick's engine. Where do we go now? Will the sheriff find us? Will that man come back? But one thing kept me driving, Tommy's tiny fingers still gripping mine. Hours passed like that, the storm never letting up, the night so black it felt like the world had swallowed us whole. Finally, just as my eyes started to close, I saw it, a flickering neon sign on the side of a crumbling diner. One car in the lot, lights on inside, maybe warm food, maybe a phone. I pulled in, killed the headlights. The Buick ticked and hissed, the engine too tired to argue anymore. I turned to Tommy, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "We're gonna get warm, baby. Then we're gonna find that shelter. And no one's ever gonna put you in a box again." I pushed open the door, the snow hitting my face like needles, and then I saw the shape standing under the diner's flickering light. A shadow I recognized, a voice that made every bruise on my body ache all over again. "Ellie," the sheriff drawled, his hand resting on the butt of his holster. "Step out where I can see you. We need to have a talk." The sheriff stood under the busted neon sign like a scarecrow waiting to pounce. Snow gathered on the brim of his hat, his breath puffing white in the freezing air. One hand rested on his belt, inches from his holster, the other hidden inside his coat. The way he watched me head cocked, eyes narrowed, told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't here to help. Tommy stirred in the back seat, whimpering. I could see his wide eyes reflected in the rearview mirror, looking from me to the sheriff and back again. My fingers drummed against the steering wheel. I felt the dried blood flaking off my knuckles, the ache in my throat where that man's hands had squeezed. I wondered if Sheriff Dugan could smell it, the fear on me, the crime. "Step on out now, Ellie." His voice was almost soft, the way you'd talk to a spooked dog. No one wants this to get messy. I cracked the window just enough for my breath to slip out. You gonna shoot me in front of my boy, Dugan? A smile curled under his mustache. Ain't planning on it if you do what you're told. My stomach twisted. I thought of David, how he'd sit on that freezer lid and whistle while my baby's cries turned to silence. Dugan was the same kind of monster, the kind who looks the other way when the fists fly, who prays in church on Sunday and drinks moonshine with the devil on Monday. What did David promise you? I asked, my voice shaking but louder now. Bear a deer carcass every fall. You let him beat us half to death because you got your cut, didn't you? His eyes narrowed, but the smile didn't leave his lips. You always were a mouthy one. You think you're some hero now. You butcher your man, stab a drifter on the road, and what? You want me to clap for you? I felt the heat rise in my chest, rage burning away the numb. He locked my baby in a freezer. How many times did I call you? How many times did you hang up? The wind howled around us, rattling the Buick's old frame. Somewhere in the dark, a highway sign squeaked on its rusted hinge. Dugan stepped closer, boots crunching over the fresh snow. Get out, Ellie. Give me the boy. We'll get you some help, a nice cell, maybe a shrink. You don't gotta make this harder. A nice cell, maybe a shrink. Like that would fix years of bruises and broken bones and a boy who didn't flinch any more when he heard screams in the night. I looked back at Tommy. His eyes were huge, tears tracking down his cheeks. He mouthed something I'll never forget. Please, Mama, don't leave me. And I knew, in that heartbeat, that if Dugan took me in, or worse, took Tommy away, we'd never see each other again. My boy would end up just like me, broken, trapped. My fingers slid into the pocket of my coat where Mrs. Parker's number was folded tight like a prayer. I could still make it. One more lie, one more push. I pushed the door open, boots hitting the snow. I kept my hands out, palms up. The cold cut through me like knives, but all I could feel was Tommy's eyes locked on my back. All right, Sheriff, I said, stepping away from the Buick. Don't scare the boy. Let me talk to him. Tell him it's gonna be okay. Dugan cocked his head, one eyebrow twitching. What's that? I inched closer to the trunk. My mind was racing. I pictured Mrs. Parker's duffel still wedged inside a few dollars, an old road map, maybe something sharp she'd slipped in when I wasn't looking. I just needed 1 second, one chance. You know how kids are, I croaked. If he sees you grab me, he'll panic. Let me talk to him. Dugan stepped closer, too close. I could see the veins in his neck, the twitch of a smile that never reached his eyes. No sudden moves, Ellie. I ain't gonna tell you again. I glanced at the Buick. Tommy pressed his hands to the glass, eyes round as moons, tears fogging up the window. He mouthed it again. Mama. My knees nearly gave out, but I had one shot left. I dropped to the snow, hands raised, like I was giving in. I leaned into the trunk, pretending to steady myself. My fingers closed around the tire iron wedged by the spare, cold, heavy. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. Dugan stepped forward. His shadow fell over me. Good girl. Stand up now. I swung. The iron cracked against his knee first, then his jaw as he stumbled forward. He let out a roar, reaching for his gun. I swung again, my muscles screaming, blood roaring in my ears. The world shrank to that single heartbeat. Protect Tommy. The sheriff collapsed into the snow, groaning, half-conscious. His gun skidded from his fingers, disappearing under the Buick's rear tire. I didn't wait to see if he'd reach for it. Again, I hauled open the driver's door, breathless. Tommy, look at me. We're leaving, baby. Now. His little face, pale, streaked with tears, cracked into the smallest, bravest nod I've ever seen. I floored the gas. The Buick roared like an old beast shaking off the chains. Snow flew behind us, swallowing the diner sign, the sheriff's broken shape, the ghosts of that old trailer with its freezer lid shut forever. I drove blind through the storm. The road a ribbon of dark through the white. Somewhere out there, there'd be warm soup, dry clothes, a church basement with a cot where Tommy could sleep without jumping at every creak. Somewhere out there, I'd learned to breathe again. I glanced at my boy in the mirror. His eyelids drooped, but he fought to stay awake. He clutched my mother's old locket in his small fist, a promise that no man, no freezer, no crooked sheriff would ever bury us again. I know people will say I went too far, that I crossed a line when I picked up that knife, but I'd ask, them, what line would you cross for your child? I'm not asking you to forgive me. Just remember me, because I'm still out there, somewhere between the snow and the dark, a mother who did what she had to do, and I'll never be locked in that box again.